Foreign predatory parasitic corporations are replacing our natural environment with an industrial landscape of wind turbines. One Nation will stand against sending children down a path of drug dependency and body mutilation to appease the gender cult. Leave our kids alone. The Trusted Digital Identity Bill is a global surveillance and control mechanism that profit-hungry corporations and power-mad politicians drafted and crafted. One Nation opposes this inhuman dystopian future that the United Nations promotes as the Great Reset, and we condemn this Parliament for signing on to it. I called for Australia to reject the World Economic Forum's Great Reset and instead mount a great resist. Just like the koalas being euthanised to make way for wind turbines or damaged solar panels leaking toxic heavy metals into waterways, the United Nations net zero plan again involves killing the environment to save it. I've been speaking about the fear, the oppression and the inhuman cruelty of our COVID response since July 2020. I promised to hound down those responsible, and I will continue relentlessly to keep that promise. You're about to be live with me, Senator Malcolm Roberts. G'day, it's Friday, time for another live stream to recap the week. Well, actually, we'll recap quite a few weeks. But let's dive straight into it. We've got something prepared for you here. The Labor Minister for Housing, Claire O'Neill, has confirmed house prices will only ever get more expensive under Labor. So if you can't afford a house now, don't expect anything to change under Labor. Have a look at her radio appearance.
Of our government.
What is the goal here in terms of these policies? Is it to bring down house price? Wants to do?
We want to bring house price growth into something sustainable. So we're not trying to bring down house prices, but we don't want to see some of the growth that we've seen in some parts of the country where you're getting double-digit increases in house prices year on year.
Why don't you want to be seeing house prices drop? Because if you're looking to get into the market, if you're a young person looking at what's ahead of you, you definitely want to see house prices come down.
Well, that may be the view of young people. It's not the view of our government. We want to see sustainable price growth. We want to see more houses come online. We want to see that rental vacancy rate go up a bit because that will relieve pressure on renters. And we certainly want to see more homeowners. And the government has taken action on all of those pieces this week.
Minister, if house prices don't come down, doesn't that mean that this system is stacked against young people, that it's just not going to work for them?
Sure, and Dave, we may have a difference of view about this. I have a strong view. Our government's policies are not going to reduce house prices. We want house prices to grow sustainably. That may be the view of
want house prices to grow sustainably. Look at the buzzword she gets in there. House price growth, sustainability. What a bunch of lies. Look, the Labor government has brought in over 2 million people in the last 2 years. Sorry, 1 million people in the last 2 years. That's 400,000 new houses at the average occupancy rate. 400,000 new houses. They're not even building close to that. And they're not bringing in tradies. They're bringing in people who can't build houses, who need houses. That's putting pressure on Aussies. Let's have a look at the next clip for you. I want to thank you to the Liberal Nationals for stealing my idea for the option of paying childcare subsidies direct to parents. So I made a short video this week explaining this position. So have a watch and let me know what you think of this. Why give that money to overseas-owned childcare centres? Why don't we give it straight to the parents? The Labor government has announced it will drop the activity test for childcare subsidies. They say it's to make childcare more affordable and accessible. History has shown us that when subsidies are introduced or increased, there's a short-term dip, and in the long run, the price of childcare only gets more and more expensive. So who really benefits? Sadly, not the hard-working parents who need relief, mostly the corporations who own childcare centres. The blanket subsidy will be given to families who earn up to $530,000 a year. Instead of a blanket subsidy that drives prices up, let's do something that actually empowers parents. Why not support parents who choose to stay home and care for their children and provide the money directly to them? Parents can choose to pay that to childcare centres or have the option of keeping it to cover caring for children at home. There are 7,000 childcare job openings a month, and we're bringing in more childcare workers through immigration. Right now, we don't need more children going to childcare centres. Let's make mothers and fathers choosing to be there full-time for their children recipients of the $10 billion a year government spends on childcare. Skyrocketing childcare costs are profitable for corporations who often have foreign owners. One Nation will put that money in your control, not hand it over to big businesses. One Nation will create a fairer system, one that places family and choice at the core and puts money back in your pocket.
Authorised Malcolm Roberts, Brisbane.
Family and choice at the core. Childcare, I'm fixated on climate change today, I've just had a long interview. Childcare prices will increase. Whenever a subsidy is brought in, prices increase. It just makes sense. What we need to do is fix the tax system so that parents can make a choice. One of them stay at home and the other go out to earn a living. At the moment, we are subsidising through our taxes, families and individuals, multinationals to not pay tax. They need to start paying their fair share of tax so that one parent can stay home. In every country on earth, the most valuable resource we have is the children, the future leaders of our country, the future civilization. And we are destroying that at the moment by putting them in centres where they're indoctrinated rather than parented. So think about that, the taxation system. And note again, One Nation led the way in this and the Liberal Nationals copied. Now, there's been big news out of the United Kingdom, Great Britain. They formally banned puberty blockers for people under the age of 18. So have a read of this. United Kingdom's ban on puberty blockers for children is not a culture war, but a safety matter. At last, we've been vindicated. The United Kingdom decision to ban puberty blockers for children indefinitely is yet another warning for Australian legislators and officials. That's from the Australian newspaper. Have a look at this. Yet again, Australia's health ministers and officials have been warned about puberty blockers, the drugs given to minors who reject their birth sex and want the wrong puberty to be chemically suppressed. The typical response from our gender medicine lobby and their social justice backers in politics is that any skepticism about standards of evidence and safety is somehow right-wing bigotry. We've been saying that we need to regulate this properly. And here's another one. But the latest wake-up call is the decision to impose an indefinite ban on puberty blockers announced by the UK's Labor government under Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who happens to be gay. I don't know what gay's got to do with it. In fact, it's a distraction, but I don't know why the journalists put that in there, but let's keep reading. And of course, Streeting, like those in Australia critical of puberty blockers, is concerned about the welfare of vulnerable young people. This is not a culture war. The endocrine systems of minors know no politics. The Cass Review into paediatric gendered medicine in Britain made clear that there is not enough evidence about the long-term effects of using puberty blockers to treat gender incongruence, also called gender dysphoria. It's a mental health condition, it's gender dysphoria, to know whether they are safe or beneficial, Streeting said in the UK House of Commons. That evidence should have been established before they were ever prescribed for this purpose. So I'm going to ask you two questions. How come we knew this and we stated this forcefully in the Senate repeatedly and in public and no one took any notice? We were jeered at by the Greens. Second question, how come the Greens pushed this on people? How come the Greens pushed it on the people? Ridiculous. And I tell you what happens. Let me just look at the next quote first before I... Okay, Australia has the type of gender clinics that were investigated in the United Kingdom. Get this, our gender clinics have sneakily changed their statements on puberty blockers. Watch this. They said originally that gender change, you can't change gender, but you know what I mean, the operations, the puberty blockers, as they are reversible in their effects. That's what they claimed. The treatments are reversible in their effects. Let's look at reality. They've quietly changed the website to say they are largely reversible. No announcement, no media release, no apology that they've been lying, just a secret change. Absolutely disgusting. And how many children have suicided as a result of this? So the puberty blockers are largely reversible. Now, the Greens have said that people opposing affirmation of gender dysphoria are causing children to suicide. That is complete rubbish. What's happening? And I pointed this out in the Senate. I've looked across at the Greens and said to them, you are causing children to suicide because children are told they can reverse the treatments when they know they can't. when doctors know they can't reverse the treatment. And then when the children find out they haven't, they regret the change they've made and they can't reverse it, that's when they suicide. Yes, Lance, what is being done to children is evil. Now, suicide is never the right way out. It's never the right way out. It causes more problems than it solves. So don't suicide if that's what you're thinking about. But please, please, recognize that you cannot reverse the effects of puberty blockers. That is now fact. That is now established. It's disgusting what they're doing. That's why I co-signed a bill to ban childhood transitions in Australia. So that's the bill I co-signed. The bill, I'll read it out, prohibits health practitioners from performing gender clinical interventions intended to transition a minor's biological sex, subject to limited exemptions, and prohibits the Commonwealth from entering into arrangements involving the expenditure or payment of money, taxpayer money, that provides or facilitates the provision of such a procedure or treatment. Surgical treatment, cutting bits of adolescent children's bodily parts off them, and secondly, the genitals or their breasts. And secondly, providing treatments. You can't provide treatments, not with taxpayer money. And that's why I co-signed that bill. So I'm putting up comments later, so make sure you have your StreamYard up. Make sure you have your Facebook up and put in your comments. That's what we want. So I'm going to go to another set of notes here that I prepared for this session. I want to celebrate some victories. But first of all, I want to celebrate the people who are on here now. Look at the truthers. Look at the truthers filing in. Thank you for being awake. Thank you for making an effort for our country. You know, we are at the front line. Together, we're at the front line of an information war, an indoctrination war. But we knocked them off on the misinformation and disinformation bill. We absolutely knocked it out of the park. Now, I raised that first when Scott Morrison introduced it into the Parliament 4 years ago. I screamed about it, spoke about it, and I've done it often since then. And bit by bit, the people have woken up, and they put so much pressure. You put so much pressure on the Labor government and the Liberal opposition that the bill was withdrawn by Labor. But they won't be long in coming up with something else, and they'll redress it as something else. So keep on target. Paul Conlon, his book, Citizen One, The Case Against Digital Identity. I had a visit from Paul. It's an excellent book, an outstanding book. It shows you how to cope with digital ID, how to minimize the impacts. An excellent book, and he talks about it in a story form. He's logical, he's an engineer, he's got the facts, and he's gone through history as well as current times. He's put everything together in a logical way, but wrapped it in a story about his grandmother, who was born and raised in Nazi Germany, and where they introduced something like this. Cattle feed additives, Bouvier. You know, some of us got involved, some of us have been warning people about this for some time. But it was the people, again, who rose up and said to Coles, said to Woolies, is this Bouvier-treated beef? Is this Bouvier-treated milk? And people here and in Europe are waking up and have put pressure on the manufacturers to come clean and declare that they won't have this. The best way to run this country is with people in charge, people pressure, people being accountable. I want to mention mention Jody Lowe's Farm Day coming up in February. There'll be more details of that early next year. Another victory. The CBA, the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, backed down on its cash fee. To take your cash, out of your account in a bank, they wanted us to pay $3 a hit. What a bloody rort. Now, the Commonwealth Bank is on track to, it's just made $10 billion in the last year, and it wants to steal $3 for accessing your money, for you to access your money. And the people rose up, and the Commonwealth Bank had to say that they could have communicated better. They should have thought about it in the first place. But that signals they're not backing down entirely, so be warned. I want to compliment Brady Gunn as well, who I met at Stand in the Park in Tygum Park, one of Brisbane suburbs, last Sunday. He started Stand in the Park, and it's spread around the world, people rebuilding community. And I want to celebrate Matt Barry's speeches. His speech, it's an hour and 18 minutes long. It's worth every minute. It talks about many issues that are crippling our country. I've mentioned every one of the issues except the last one that he mentioned, but he wraps it together so well over a long period. And I've also posted his data page, because, man, it's 128 pages, but it's got everything in it. So I want to just go through quickly the last 4 weeks from Senate estimates. Monday the 4th of November was Senate estimates hearings. You know, they're long days, 8 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. I'm going to discuss one day the TGA question that I asked. It's a ripper, and the answer will startle you. If we get time, I'll go into it today. The videos that have been published on my Facebook, Instagram, and X pages show what happened during our sessions in Senate estimates. Energy, health, COVID mismanagement, COVID deceit, COVID fraud, raw COVID, and so many other issues. The energy rebate right now is hiding electricity prices. Then we had 2 weeks in Canberra. Labor changed the report on the misinformation and disinformation bill, literally changed the bloody report on the bill from the inquiry to reflect what the people were saying, to justify. Then we had on the last day of Parliament, which I'll talk about later, if time permits, we had a 28 bills, was it 31 bills, guillotined. Then straight after that night, I flew to Perth and took part in the great debate, and I want to congratulate Port Hedland Council for the marvellous debate they put on, and all the speakers who spoke with me. It was a wonderful evening. Thanks to the 1,000 people who came out in Perth and filled the hall, and what a lot of energy you put in there. Flew back on the red eye, and then went to the Plant Med Christmas party, which is celebrating the cannabis, medicinal cannabis they're proudly making available to Australians here in Brisbane. It's a wonderful group, Plant Med, P-L-A-N-T, another word, M-E-D, Plant Med. Then I had to prepare for the COVID inquiry, which we ran in our office. And then on Saturday, I had the pleasure of, and was stimulated a lot by the people at the Ayn Rand Institute conference here in Brisbane. Very stimulating. I don't agree with everything, but very stimulating and different perspective, a wonderful perspective in many ways. Per capita recession is getting worse. Then I flew to Cairns on Monday to take part in a Mariba citizenship ceremony. And look, I'm really disappointed that a couple of our trolls, which you'll expect, I guess, they don't think, they just bitch and moan, but they criticised me taking part in a citizenship ceremony because I'm opposed to immigration right now. We want to stop immigration right now, put a pause on immigration. That's not a conflict. The people who were inducted in or granted citizenship in the citizenship ceremony were 3 people. 2 from New Zealand, one of whom's been here for 13 years, came here as a child, and he now wants to become an Australian citizen. He works here, he contributes to the country, and same with the lady. I don't know how long she's here, but I think she's been here even longer than 13 years. And they're contributing to our society. They abide by our values, abide by our laws, fit into our culture, and they deserve citizenship. They came here 7 or more years ago when immigration was lower, still too high, but it was lower. But it's not their fault. So they're contributing, they've shown their worth. And then the other lady, the third lady who was there was from Brazil. She's been here 5 years. Partner is Australian, a good Australian man from North Queensland. And she wants to settle here. Again, contributing and fitting in and complying with our laws and contributing to our culture. She's a wonderful person to have here. So I'm going to celebrate people who make a commitment to our country. I'm not going to be cowed by trolls who just trying to get us to drop our agenda on immigration. We oppose immigration right now. It needs to be cut. In fact, we need to send some residents home because they're not contributing to Australia. They're not complying with the laws in which they're allowed into the country. We've got far too many people coming in. We need to shut it down. But I'm going to celebrate every Australian. Oh, and by the way, my Senate running mate in next year's election has been selected. She will be announced in a few weeks or maybe early next year. Now, I've got another guest to come in. Last year I celebrated Australia's birthday. For a couple of years I've done that because it's not Australia Day. Australia Day is a wonderful national day. But our birthday, we were formed as a nation on the 1st of January, 1901. And that's what I celebrate as Australia's birthday. So I put a note in my calendar every year to come up with any ideas. So this year, I've welcomed a guest to come in, Ben Shand, Dusty Bogan, to talk about his idea, which started last year and started catching on, Australia Month. Over to the clip. We pre-recorded yesterday.
How you going, mate? Thanks for having me on. We've got Australia Month coming up. We're almost there. And, last year, me and my mates on Twitter, we were having a chat. We were talking about the idea of Australia Month. Now, Federation Day is January 1. So we start the year. I think we should all start the year in Australia, and it's Happy New Year. Well, it should be Happy Federation Day. Like, what a brilliant, this is the beginning of our nation, isn't it? Like, this is where all the colonies became one nation. And, thanks for having me on One Nation, because you take from Federation Day all the way up to the 26th of January, we have a whole month to celebrate what is terrific and amazing about this nation. It's quite often people are hungover on New Year's Day and they kind of don't realise it's Federation Day. They don't get that celebration spirit. And, Australia Day, 24 hours just isn't enough. And, with the way we have it these days with social media, we get to see the Americans. They have a month for this and a month for that. Well, thank you, Australia. We need a whole month. What do you reckon, Malcolm?
I reckon we do. And I love the idea, start with Federation Day, which is what I've always celebrated, or for some years I've celebrated, and go right through till Australia Day, our national day. So the birthday to the national day. That's a great idea, Ben.
Yeah, because like last year, I guess it was the first time what was an idea it went crazy on Twitter. And you started January, New Year's Day this year. I woke up and Malcolm Roberts had hashtag Australia Month. And it was like you set the domino effect. You energized so many people, and hashtag Australia Month went absolutely crazy. And I think you are to blame if people say, Australia Month. And some people actually, I can't believe some people get upset about us celebrating this great nation.
So now you've got other people involved. You've got a T-shirt. Where can people get your T-shirt?
This shirt here, Dave Pallo has created it for us. If you go to on Twitter, go to at the Dusty Bogan. Go to my Twitter. I've got a pinned post there. It will link you to where a good mate Dave Pallo runs Church and State.
Good man. Very good man.
Do the merch for us. So
he's drawing up his own singlet this year, his own T-shirt this year. It's got an Australia flag and a couple of other things on it. Just very, very simple, and clear.
And we kind of thought, it is like one of these things. I'm not making any money from the merch, and we thought, how can we all wanted merch. Dave does merch, and we actually wanted to support what he does in his conference. I enjoy going to church. Every year I go to Church and State. I'll never miss it. And I thought, Dave, help us with the shirts. We want to bless you. It's every time you buy a shirt, it goes to Church and State Conference. We make no money out of it. And, that's a part of Australiana. We want to be generous. And Dave's just so generous to all of us. And, we've got so many groups involved. Hayes Media Group. We've got the Observer, John Lawson. He's jumped on the bandwagon. You've jumped on the bandwagon. Stephen Shavira's always onto it. I think you've got some competition with the Libertarians. If we can get Clive and the Libertarians, and I think Australia Month has to belong to all of us. It's not about the Dusty Bogan talking about Australia Month. Forget about me. Australia Month is for every single one of us. Unleash your creativity, celebrate the whole month however you want. People are, just crazy with the memes they create. And like this here, I don't know, do you know the British Australian community at all?
I know a few of them, yeah.
Yeah, so they actually created this logo for us. And, I said, this is the Australian flag. What's the other flag? And so they're very switched on. They know the history well of Australia. I'm not quite there, you know what I mean? But this is the flag of Federation Day. So I was like, well, there's actually a flag. And when people sort of run with Australia Month, you get all the history buffs start pulling up all this gold. You start getting poetry and artwork and historical champions of Australia. And this is where it goes beyond one person. It goes beyond 100 people. I think last year there was thousands of people really made Australia Month.
So what we're looking for is ways of celebrating several times during that month, or 27 days, asking everyday Aussies what it means to be Australian values, identify them, list them, celebrate them, what we appreciate about Australia. These are just notes I made. Where could we improve and restore our country? So you just want people to focus on Australia, but above all, celebrate and appreciate Australia, right?
That's right. Like, people were very, I think overall it was very positive. It was very I think we all see the Invasion Day stuff and you're like, well, that's quite negative. I think no one wants anything to do with it, quite frankly. Well, you don't go to work and interact with people in your everyday life with hostility. No one does. We want to celebrate. We want something positive. And, we've got, we're going to do a New Year's live stream on Twitter. And then we're going to do a go for beers and have a dress up. The most crazy Australian fit person will win an Australian-made Aussie flag. And then on the 26th of January in Brisbane, Ascot Park, we've got a live band, free barbecue, BYO drinks and flags. We're going to do a Aussie plunger throwing competition.
I've got to go now because we've got to limit this.
Thanks, Malcolm.
Where can they get more information? And
go hashtag Australia Month. Type that into Twitter. It will come up with the official @Australia Month Twitter page, and follow me at the Dusty Bogan on Twitter. Love to stay in contact. Send me a message. Jump on board. If you have any events you want to put on, I'll help promote it. Let's go. God bless you. Thanks, One Nation.
And it's not just about British heritage. It's about all heritages, all Australian heritages. Regardless of any
Jump
background.
on it, make it your own. That's what I say.
Thank you very much, Ben, otherwise known as the Dusty Bogan. Thank you, and I'll help you celebrate, mate.
Cheers, mate. Thanks, Malcolm. God bless you.
Well, there you go. I made a couple of notes from Ben just now. This is not a political thing. It's not for a party. It's for all Australians. Ascot Park, he's got a function on in Ascot Park. I think he said the 26th, Australia Day. So to learn more, go to hashtag Australia Month, and have a look at Dusty Bogan on X. Wonderful guy, down to earth, very down to earth, straight, passionate about Australia. Next, I will introduce a chat that I had with a fellow early this morning. Again, another pre-record. Josh Hawkes is his name. He's fighting for all firefighters who are still out of a job because they refuse to take the COVID jabs. And that's despicable. It's absolutely despicable. So here in this video is what he told me earlier. Have a listen to this. Okay, this is Josh Hawkes, Australian Firefighters Alliance Director in Victoria. He's going to give us an update on what's happening in Victoria with the Australian Firefighters Alliance.
Thanks, Senator Roberts, and thanks for the opportunity to come on with you. I'm one of the directors of the Australian Firefighters Alliance, and we formed the alliance in 2021 as a defence mechanism for those persecuted under mandatory vaccination requirements in Victoria, and that spread to New South Wales, obviously in Queensland, and it eventually encompassed the whole country. We've got over 200 members in our membership. As it stands right now, we've got mandatory settings that remain for firefighters in Victoria off the back of the pandemic declaration that was instituted by Dan Andrews' government back in 2021. However, the fire service has continued with those settings since the revocation of the pandemic declaration in 2022 as a persecution, basically, of those who were not compliant with those measures initially. So where we currently stand is that there's roughly 40 firefighters still stood down in Victoria, prohibited from working. Not even healthcare have the mandatory vaccination settings anymore. Victoria was the last healthcare department to remove those settings, which was removed on October 4th. The argument would be that those settings had to remain in place for Victorian firefighters because of a participation in a healthcare program, which is emergency medical response. So everything that was done was reasonably practicable to keep people safe as far as vaccination was concerned. Yet those settings still remain for our firefighters. And at this present moment, like I said, roughly 40 firefighters still stood down. And now you've got the union, the major union who represents firefighters in Victoria.
What's their name?
The United Firefighters Union.
Yep.
So they are now issuing, or they have issued a survey to their members asking what they think about the situation about returning firefighters to the stood down cohort to duty. But it also asks the question about what constitutes vaccination or defines vaccination status, be it the multiple choice answer, 2 answers only, a single primary dose and a booster, or a primary dose and 2 boosters. Both of those answers are incorrect. And so
that's something else. I'll get to it in a minute.
So the alignment with ATAGI has been, through FOI, we've determined that the agency in Victoria has aligned itself, or trying to align itself with ATAGI guidance. But that guidance has evolved, as you would know, Senator, so many times that no mandatory requirements for boosters have been enforced since March 2022. So the vaccination status should have been a primary dose and 2 boosters over that period up until March 2022, but several boosters should have been taken in order to be quote unquote up to date. That has not been enforced. So the vaccination status of the entire workforce would be at best indeterminable. So the stood down cohort are no greater danger to anyone who's actually working there at the moment. And it really is, at this point in time, heading into a 4th Christmas, stood down. It is a clearly persecutory effort and is not based on health or the safety of any individual or the protection of the community. And I can tell you that we've got such dire staffing shortages in Victoria that they're putting fire trucks offline because sufficient staff can't be found.
Thank you. That was a very, very effective summary, and you did it in 4 minutes. Wow, that's really impressive, Josh. So let me there's something you didn't raise from our previous discussion yesterday, but let's make a summary. Firstly, this is a safety issue for the whole community because fire trucks are being stood down, meaning no coverage for fighting fires, and so that means people's lives are at risk. Secondly, this is now the 4th year you're entering of this persecution. Thirdly, the persecution, I think that's an entirely appropriate word. It's there to teach people, like the 40 people who are still off, the lesson to comply in future with what I believe is an unlawful, inhuman mandate. It's not a mandate at all, but that's what I believe. Secondly, it's to make an example of you guys. Make an example so that no one else dares step out of line and exercise their basic human rights. Thirdly, we've now got a survey by, I understand it now, Peter Marshall's the head of the union?
He is.
Right, we've now got a survey of the members of the union as to whether or not and on what conditions you should be allowed back. So the health advice is now going to be in the hands of a survey of firefighters. So they've replaced the health advice with that. They've said all along, I believe they were wrong in doing this, that they respected ATAGI and followed ATAGI's wishes. This goes beyond ATAGI now. So, secondly, I just want to point out something. You said these should be taken. I know you meant under the directions these should be taken, but my view is they should not be taken at all. These injections are being increasingly called upon around the world to be stopped. We know that from the statistics, the data, that the 4th, 5th, and 6th boosters are killers. We know that. The other thing that I just want to ask you to talk about quickly, because we're running out of time, is you told us that the firefighters, such as yourself, are very aware, and the whole firefighting industry is very aware of cancer risks when you enter a building that's on fire. And yet here we go, forcing people to get injections from things that are now known and proven to be cancer promoters and cancer accelerators. And not only that, we're seeing now around the world double cancers occurring at the same time in people and rapidly growing. So they're basically breaching their own restrictions. Is that correct?
Yeah, so briefly, Senator, that there's presumptive legislation in Victoria because, and that aligns with other states, and there's been some good work done by the union in that space because firefighting is inherently an oncogenic vocation. What is now starting to really surface and has been replicated in multiple labs is this DNA contamination issue that is basically pointing to the fact, and Professor Angus Dalgleish, who you've spoken to,
Marvellous man.
And he's an absolutely remarkable human being. But these things are now proving to be, or all the evidence is pointing towards being oncogenic themselves. So a control measure is being used in the firefighting agency, endorsed by the union, that is going to result in these cancers being prolific. It's just egregious.
Right, let's close it there. We'll be playing this in a live stream later this afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. But above all, thank you for what you're doing, your leadership, your integrity, your courage. You remind me of Dan McDonald, who's your counterpart in Queensland. Very high integrity, very high courage, entirely respectful stance. I've admired Dan and his work since the first day I met him. He's been marvellous, and likewise you, it seems. You both got shiny domes too.
We do. I have to bookend all of this, Senator Roberts, just given that I'm a representative of the AFA itself. It's a nationally registered company, and I'm not here representing any agency or as an employee. And it's actually illegal to go after people if they're representing their colleagues in this fashion. So I'm only doing what's lawful, and my statements here don't represent anyone other than the AFA. So I appreciate your time and respect your wonderful work in the Senate.
Thank you so much, Josh, and let's stay in touch, see how we can help you.
Thanks so much.
Well, there you have a magnificent individual, magnificent human being. And I meant what I said. He reminds me so much of Dan McDonald, his counterpart up here leading the Australian Firefighters Alliance in Queensland. And I want to point out that in Queensland, all the services were, the emergency services, the response services, were mandated except for one, and that was the firefighters. They still have not been mandated. And that's because of the work of Dan McDonald and the Australian Firefighters Alliance. And I meant what I said too. Dan has shown, and Josh have shown, integrity and courage and a professionalism that is so rare and so refreshing. He's shown respect every one of his details. He just commands respect himself because of the way he conducts himself. So the Australian Firefighters Alliance, if you want to make a donation, they didn't ask me to do this. This is my idea. So it's Australian Firefighters Alliance, one word, .org. Australian Firefighters Alliance.org. So if you can see your way to helping these people. Dan McDonald, I know, because he's told me, is living on the Gold Coast with his family, and he is being persecuted. They are hounding him because they want to make an example of him, how they can punish people indiscriminately. Now, thank goodness the Labor government has gone from Queensland, and hopefully that persecution will stop. So I call on the LNP government in Queensland to stop that persecution of Dan McDonald. He's done a marvellous job, and he's being treated as a villain, as less than human, and that's got to stop. So if you can see your way to donating, AustralianFireFightersAlliance.org. .org. Okay. Speaking of COVID, I want to talk about a COVID under trial inquiry. This is the third. It was held Wednesday week ago, so 9 days ago, in my office. It's the third inquiry that we have organised in our office. I want to give you some of the highlights. Tell you some of the highlights rather than give them to you, because the videos will be coming out. These are some of the people we had as witnesses in our inquiry. Senator Ron Johnson from America, the United States of America Senate. He is the leading politician in the country exposing this. He has been on it from the start. He's been alone many times. Rand Paul has joined him in some way. Now Robert Kennedy has joined him. So Ron Johnson, thank you so much it was a marvellous testimony. So much respect for Ron, and such a decent fella. Then we had Member of Parliament from New Zealand, Tanya Unkovic. She's from New Zealand First Party, which is part of the New Zealand coalition government, in coalition with ACT and with the National Party. That's right. Now, this is a remarkable story. I'm going to tell it just briefly, because, as I said, the videos will be coming out. Winston Peters went into coalition government with Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand 2 terms ago. People were surprised. He came out of that very disillusioned, I think. But during the sitting of the last parliament, the previous parliament, when Labor was in power on its own under Jacinda Ardern, there was a massive protest in Wellington of the injection injured, those who've taken the COVID injection and injured, or the bereaved, the survivors of those who died from the COVID shots. And Winston Peters did what a good representative of the people should be doing, going down and listening to the people. He went down into the crowd and listened, and he was absolutely horrified. He found not only serious injuries, people debilitated, written off for life, crippled, the huge number of deaths due to the shots. He was also ashamed by the fact that New Zealand health officials had been gaslighting these people into saying, no, health condition, it's just anxiety. You're not suffering physical symptoms at all. These people, some of them are crippled. I know some of them. And the exact same thing is happening in this country. So Winston Peters came back, and his party made an election campaign promise that they would have a royal commission, a proper royal commission. There was already one underway. It was a bogus whitewash, one commissioner, I believe. Now, when the Nationals came into power, they didn't have enough MPs to form government. They had more than the Labor Party, but not enough to form government. So they did a coalition with New Zealand First and with the ACT. And Winston Peters said, coalition on basis of one, I don't know if there are other conditions, but one strong condition, that they have a proper royal commission into this, proper inquiry. That inquiry has now changed to have more commissioners, changed to have more powers, and to be extended to include COVID injections. Albanese won't do that in this country, gutless. Peter Dutton won't do that in this country, gutless, because they're afraid of the truth. Extend it in terms of a deadline. They've now got another 12 months. Extend it in terms of breadth to cover the injections and the injection injured and the injection contracts. The injection contracts, which both the Labor Party and the Liberal Party are hiding in this country. What are they hiding? So that's what happens with a coalition government. When you vote for a minor party and you get a few in, they have the balance of power. They have, in this case, the coalition. And I want to acknowledge Winston Peters because he stood up for the people after listening to the people. And I want to thank Tanya Unkovic. She came and was a splendid witness. New Zealand First Member of Parliament in New Zealand, Tanya Unkovic. Thank you. Another highlight was the European Union Member of Parliament, Christine Anderson. She's a German. And despite a name like Anderson, she's a German. She's in the European Union. And she has been outspoken from the start as well about calling out the COVID mismanagement, the COVID fraud. A very, very strong woman, forceful. And then we also had Professor Angus Dalgleish, who's from the United Kingdom. I won't go into the details, but he is one of the highlights, and I'll talk more about him in a minute. Well, let's mention it. He's been on this from the start. He's an immunologist. He's a virologist. So he knows about viruses, vaccines, and he's also an oncologist. So he knows about the result of these hideous shots. He knows about people with double cancers, two cancers at the same time, two different types of cancers at the same time as a result of the shots. He knows about them growing remarkably quickly, accelerated cancers, turbocharged cancers, call them what you like. He knows they exist. And he confirmed so much for me in the hearing. So his video will be a real highlight when you see it, because I put some blunt questions to him, many blunt questions. He confirmed every single one of them. It is hideous, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. To go back to the start, he also is connected with the Tory party that was in power when they were mismanaging COVID in Britain, and so he warned them, and his warnings, sadly, were not heeded and came true. We started the proceedings last Wednesday, a week ago, with two brief videos from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., marvellous videos. He really opened things up. Another highlight was Julian Gillespie, the lawyer, who again, I put several steps to him, and he's a former barrister, very, very capable man, and he confirmed every one of my points as well. Other witnesses included Gigi Foster, the economist, and wow, was she bright and very, very powerful speaker. Dr. Ian Brightope, another powerful speech from me, and he knows his facts. He's been trained in Western medicine, but he's also a very, very strong in integrative medicine and proper health care, not disease treatment. Disease treatment as well as proper health care, I should say. We had Dr. Peter Parry, and all of these people came. I asked them, and they said yes immediately, every one of them. Dr. Peter Parry gave us a summary of the COVID spike protein, over just a very brief summary. We had data analyst Dr. Rafael Latesta, who is notable for winning 2 court cases on this. He's won it based upon his statistical analysis and his data. And he gave us quite clear evidence that the shots are killers. Dr. Melissa McCann featured in a video. She's leading a lawsuit. She's filed suit in the federal court, I think it is, in Sydney, on behalf of a class action on behalf of, I think it's thousands of vaccine injured, but certainly hundreds. Then we had, to round off the day, we closed down the public session. Then we had a private session. A prominent Australian doctor, a specialist. He wanted to be in camera, confidential. So what we're going to do with him, why did he want to be confidential? Because he's been threatened by some of the health agencies in this country, the disease agencies, the big pharma shills in this country. That's why he had to be in camera, because of threats. So what we're going to do is make a transcript of his participation, of his evidence, his testimony, and then get that out. And we'll probably be doing a voiceover to get so that you see the video, because many wonderful slides. I want to thank Senator Pauline Hanson, MP Russell Broadbent from Victoria, I think it's the seat of Monash, and also Senator Alex Antic for being with me on the inquiry. Pauline came despite being very, very sick and having a very sore back, as well as having a heavy dose of the flu. And she came and had to leave early because she just wasn't up to it. She asked some marvelous questions while she was there. But Russell Broadbent has been a tower of strength. He's been alone for most of the time in the lower house. So I want to thank him and Alex. I invited 9 people to make it a proper cross-party, multi-party hearing and inquiry into COVID under trial. 7 of them committed to attending. 4 of us were present. So thank you so much to the others who came. The videos, we made a video of everything, including the in-camera session, and we'll use that video to get a transcript, but the others, we'll be releasing them soon. I want to thank Ryan and Dean, who were technicians there. Look, my staff have worked so damn hard on these inquiries. We're the only ones to hold inquiries. The federal government won't hold proper inquiry. So they're a lot of work. So we couldn't afford to put all that work into it again. So I want to thank Ryan and Dean, who came in and did the recording, and then the coordinating. We've got the video now. It's a massive video, and we'll just chop it up and release them individually. So thank you, Ryan and Dean. Look, this leads to another point, very, very important point, and that is that compensation. There have been people who have been victims of homicide. They have been killed by government policy. Homicide. There have been the bereaved of those people killed by government policy. There have been people severely injured, critically, or crippled for life. I know of two people who woke up one morning about 12 months after their shot, completely paralyzed, with just barely one hand moving in one lady's case. Personal friend of mine and my wife. She couldn't get out of bed. All she could do was call on a mobile phone to get someone to come and get her. And they took her to hospital. No clue what was going on. We now know what was happening, but at the time they had no clue. She was kept there for several days and then released with no treatment. Left to go and fend for herself. She's lost her income. She works from home, does a marvellous job in her professional services, and she does a marvellous job counselling people, helping people, guiding people, and she can't do that. So she's got additional expenses. She literally got around by walking backwards on hands and feet like a crab, but backwards. That was the only way she could move when she eventually came back home. The doctors could do nothing for her. Natural health people have come in and given her some advice, and she's now getting around on her feet at last. And I saw her last night, in fact, at a function, and she's in a wheelchair. So she's slowly getting back, but we know that was a vaccine injury. We know that. Same with the other fellow who was crippled, almost completely paralyzed, quadriplegic. These people and others, including children who have been suffering debilitating mental health issues due to lockdowns, isolation, and missing school. We've also got people who have been hurt by the injection mandates, lost their jobs, lost their house, lost their family. We've got people who started small business, literally took out loans, made contracts. In one case I was talking this morning, made them in January of 2020, 2 months later, out, finished, done, and he's still paying off some of the debt. Had to rejig his whole life. These are what need to be compensated. And I'll tell you why that we need compensation, and to tell you why we are ramping it up now. The CSIRO admitted early on in the COVID mismanagement that they took part in gain-of-function research. Gain-of-function research, for those who don't understand, is where scientists get down and they start researching a virus. And they start modifying the virus so that it will become either easier to transmit from person to person, so that it becomes more infectious, and or more severe in its effects. COVID, we know, came from the problem with COVID was the spike protein. We were all told that. That was what made it lethal. We were told that. Now we have proof, scientifically peer-reviewed papers, that the COVID spike protein was engineered, was designed by humans. We know that it was designed illegally. We know that it was designed with two massive cover-ups to hide the story, and I'll go into them in a future time. I've already done it publicly, so I've got no worries about that. I haven't got the time right now. I want to get on to Q&A. So what I'm calling on is the government to give compensation to all people injured by the COVID response. That includes small businesses, that includes individuals, includes families, it includes people who suffered because of the injection mandates and weren't injected. It includes people, the bereaved from COVID injection deaths and the COVID injection injured. All these people, because the CSIRO was involved, it admitted they were involved in gain-of-function research that created this spike protein. But if the government pays compensation, it really comes from the taxpayer. So what we want is Pfizer to refund the money it was paid for the injections that they provided, because they didn't work. They're clearly unsafe, and they were clearly fraudulent in their nature, and they're clearly not effective. Now the contract, as we understand it from seeing contracts from other countries, the contracts are null and void and the immunity that was granted to Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca is null and void when there's fraud involved. We now have proof there's fraud. So we want Pfizer to give us the money back, Moderna to give the money back, AstraZeneca to give the money back, refund to the Australian people what they were paid, and to also then go further and pay the damages, because these things were killers. And in terms of the shots, that's where the producers of the shots should pay the compensation. As I said, when these videos come out in the coming days, watch all of them. We know people who watched the day live and the recording that was left on Facebook live, they're stunned with what came out. Angus Dalglish's session in particular, and Julian Gillespie's session, have a look. People deserve compensation. They have been crueled, had their lives changed, had their lives terminated, had their lives crippled by government lies and dishonesty. We know that for a fact now, and it's emerging throughout the world. And what we need to do as more and more doctors, just 2 more specialists came out yesterday, one in America and one in Britain, highly respected people saying, stop the shots, stop the boosters. So we have got to make sure that people compensated, because you deserve compensation. You absolutely deserve it. You've been lied to and gaslit. So I'll now take Q&A. Jeez, it's 56 minutes gone. I'll now take Q&A, and then Maureen Kidd says, yes, they want us all in multi-storey flats and apartments, and they'll offer us a good deal to purchase these boxes. Well, they want to force us in there. And by the way, there's more energy used in a high-rise apartment than in a house. It just doesn't make sense. Anyway, over to Q&A. I don't see the chat comments. Joe says, it's shameful, this stuff. No wonder so many parents are pulling their kids out of school in Australia. We need to get things back to true normal. Get rid of all this woke shit. Absolutely, Joe. That's correct. And, that's one of the silver linings from the COVID response, the COVID mismanagement, the COVID deceit, that people couldn't send their children to school. They had to look after them at home. And then they suddenly saw what was in the curriculum. They were horrified. Those children didn't go back to school. There are so many people. I gave a speech on this in the Senate. The incidence of homeschooling in Queensland has gone up 240%. It's trebled. Parents are taking things into their own hands. That's wonderful. Now the economy is on life support. This is living Adam, man. Now the economy is on life support and small businesses failing at a record rate. Correct. And you can see where it's come from. And they did it deliberately. They did it knowingly. We were told that the COVID virus was, by the experts, the COVID virus problem was the spike protein, which we now know was engineered, designed, deliberately made. And so I asked a question, and the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, which approved our shots in this country, with no testing. They relied on Pfizer's tests. Could you imagine that? The TGA and the other health authority said it's the spike protein that's the killer, and that's what we got to be careful of. And yet they approved injections that turn our cells into spike protein factories. They don't, and they cripple the immune system. I haven't got time to go into that now, but the TGA, I asked them a question in Senate estimates 4 weeks ago. Is the spike protein pathogenic? And they said, no, Senator Roberts, it's not. It's not pathogenic. It's not a problem. They knew that my second question, if they'd said yes, would have been, why did you then approve injections that turned people's cells into spike protein factories? We've got them. We've just got to expose them now, and that's the difficult part. Now the economy. Yeah, I've got that question. Belinda says, yes, many parents left the system once they saw the propaganda pushed through state schools. So that was a benefit. The parents got closer to the schools, had to look more closely at the curriculum, and they were horrified. Many people have told me that. Brisbane rents have gone from $350 to $450 to $550 in 2 years. The next renewal, it's going up to $600. Our pay has gone up $50 a month. This is destroying our lives. Correct. And what's driving it is the record immigration. The 1 million people more than 1 million people brought in addition to stay here as permanent migrants. More than 1 million in 2 years. More than 1 million. what did I say before? 400,000 extra houses just for those 2 years. We're not building them anything close, anything like that. And if you look at the number of people who've come in, it's been over 1 million. We've got 2.9 million people, more than a tenth of our population, as permanent residents requiring a bed and a roof. That's why it's going up. And the government is doing it deliberately. Have a look at Matt Barry's speech given in Sydney a couple of weeks ago. It's a wonderful speech. As I said, only one thing new in it. We've covered all the topics before, but he's put it all together. And he's got a wonderful data page as well. A really first-class speech. Look, speaking of first class, Paul Conlon visited my office yesterday. He's an author. He wrote this book, Citizen One, The Case Against Digital Identity. Paul Conlon. He's an engineer, so he's got a logical brain, structured it well, but he's also a communicator. I haven't got time to go into the details. I was going to go into this, but because this is a bloody good book, so I'm going to promote it on social media. I was going to go into detail. I won't at the moment. But he's an engineer, but more importantly, he understands that people connect with stories. His grandmother was in Nazi Germany as a child, born in Nazi Germany, raised there, and left there later on. And she understands, and so his family has been engrossed or enmeshed in basically the Nazi version of digital identity. So he knows all about it, and he wraps a bloody good story around it. I'll put more details on the social media pages. Look, I want to finish with a question a comment rather, that we got. Quite often people were leaving the polling stations in the Queensland election saying, we just had to get rid of Labor. It was absolutely terrible. We agree. So I voted Liberals 1, One Nation 2, because I had to make sure the Liberals would get in. They just voted LNP. And then some of them said, we supported you, we put you 2. That's not how it works. I'll tell you how it needs to work. Put One Nation 1. If the One Nation candidate doesn't get up, because we're a minor party, sometimes we get into the two-party preferred, so we're up there. But if we don't get in, put Liberals before Labor. Then your vote, if it goes from us to the other minor parties, and eventually none of them parties get up. So that's the way to vote. But One Nation 1, LNP somewhere down the rank, but ahead of Labor. So give the minor parties a go, like Tanya Unkovic and Winston Peters in New Zealand do so much more. They're holding the Nationals accountable. So the only way to support One Nation is by voting for us. The way to support the country is One Nation 1. If One Nation doesn't get up, then put the LNP before Labor. Look, I've got a couple of upcoming dates. Queensland Labor Segregation Day, 17th of December. 17th of December is when they brought in their mandates and segregated the society into the injected and the non-injected. Anyone got any ideas for how to commemorate that? Let us know. I make note of it every year. A dark day for Queensland. Dave Pello's Church and State Conference coming up in March of 2025. I think the early bird registration is until the 31st of December. One of the best conferences in Australia every year. And people from who are formally or currently in the Defence Forces who want to take part in the Defence Inquiry into the Honours and Awards system, they're looking for witnesses. So by all means, get hold of our office and we'll tell you how to put your name forward. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you for being here today. I hope it's been interesting for you and informative, and I'll hopefully see you next week with the last live stream before Christmas, and maybe give you a summary of what we learned at the COVID inquiry, COVID under trial. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend and see you next week.